Hey, bonjour, bonjour, and bienvenue to everyone. You are in the right place if you are expecting the presentation from Adrian Leeds on pursuing the dream of living in France. My name is Linda Witt. I'm the president of the Federation of Alliance Francaise USA. And with me today, I have Melissa Sora behind the scenes. She's our national programs administrator, and she is managing the logistics of this event. And speaking of logistics, we are expecting several hundred people today. Melissa, if you'll go back to the first slide, thank you. We are expecting several hundred people today, so I'm going to make a few announcements here at the opening to give all of our guests time to get into the room and get settled. So you'll notice that you will be muted during the presentation. We suggest that you keep your view option set to speaker and not gallery. So in theory, on your screen right now, you should be seeing our welcome bienvenue slide and then maybe one little box with the present speaker in it. We encourage you throughout the presentation today to enter your questions in the chat, and I have that little asterisk there to remind me that we would like you, when you enter your questions in the chat, to try to keep them on topic, concerning what Adrian is talking about at the time. And then also, if we don't have a chance to get to all of your questions during the presentation, don't worry, because at the end of the presentation, we'll be giving you an email address that you can continue discussions with Adrian regarding your questions. And then we expect everything to go well here logistically. We haven't had any problems, but if you should happen to get booted from the session or something should go haywire, just wait a minute and then come back in on the previous link that you used. Next slide, Melissa, please. Okay, I know that most of you in the audience today are already members of an Alliance Francaise chapter here in the United States, but the few of you aren't, so we just wanted to share with you a little bit of information about the Alliance Francaise, because we might be able to help you on the language side of things with your upcoming stay in France. The Alliance Francaise offers in-class and online classes. Gosh, our online classes have been very popular, you can imagine, because of the pandemic. What makes us unique is that we offer small interactive classes with native fluent instructors that can help you with French that is as it's actually spoken and not necessarily textbook French. In addition to, I should say, textbook French. And then because we're all nonprofits, we offer fabulous value, and we have 107 chapters doing more than 850,000 instruction hours per year, and we've been doing this since 1902, so we like to think of ourselves as the experts. Next slide, please. And then in addition to French language instruction, we also have cultural programs, and today's event with Adrian is actually one of those cultural programs. These are 4, 5, 6 of the programs that we have coming up within the next couple of weeks. The 4 of them are in English, and the last 2, the one on Molière and French Like Moi with Scott Carpenter, those 2 are going to be in French. So visit your local chapter or visit afusa.org for more information on the cultural programs. Next slide, Melissa, thank you. And then now to our featured speaker, Adrian Leeds. Adrian has lived in France for over 25 years. She is known to many of us in the Alliance Francaise network because she used to come, when we could do live events and visit our chapters and present there. And that's how I met Adrian some 12 years ago, I think. Adrian is an HGTV personality. She's a regular on House Hunters International. She runs the Adrian Leeds Group, a licensed real estate agency, property consultation service that helps people, mainly Anglophones, with their purchases or rentals throughout France. So without further ado, please take it away, Adrian.
Well, Linda, thank you so much, and Melissa. And before I get started on my presentation, I'd like to also thank the Alliance Francaise, who has hosted me many times over the years, and it's been a wonderful collaboration, so I really appreciate that. And I'd also like to just make note that Patty Sadowskis is on. She's my assistant. She's waving right now. You can see her. The way this is going to work is I'm going to make a presentation. I'm going to share my screen right about now. let's see if I can get this working. Here we go. And there will be a Q&A at the end, but you might want to go ahead and put your questions into the chat, because Patty's going to go ahead and monitor those questions, and she may call on you at the end to ask them yourself, so that you can unmute and actually, just ask it yourself so that we can have some interaction. So this is how to escape to France. Okay, it's really easier than you might think. And this was put together especially for the Alliance Francaise Federation. So just to give you a little idea of who we are property consultants, and we work primarily for the buyer rather than, even though we are a licensed real estate agency in France, we don't just list properties and sell them. In fact, I don't think of myself as a salesperson at all. We think of ourselves as doing French property the American way, because we are by Americans, North Americans, for North Americans. Our services include consultation, search, sales and listings, even purchase or sales assistance, which is for someone who has already identified a property and they need help through the process. We do appraisal, we help people get financing and all sorts of other financial resources. And we provide renovation and decoration as well. So it's really kind of soup to nuts. Now, the reason that we even exist is all because there is no MLS, multiple listing service. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later, but because there's no MLS in France, it means that basically every agency only represents its own little pocket of properties, and they don't have access to all properties everywhere. So you really need someone to help you find property. And that's how we even came in existence. But everything in France is different. The process is different, the laws are different, the language, of course, is different, but maybe not so different for some of you who are already speaking French. You're dealing in a different currency, you're dealing in a different culture, you're dealing in a different everything. I fell in love with Paris the first time I came as a tourist in 1979. And we started coming back year after year after year. And at one point, my family and I decided that this was getting really ridiculous and we needed to just come to Paris for a year and see what that was like. Well, I can tell you now that if you come for a year, you are never leaving. That was more than 26 years ago. And I certainly haven't regretted a single minute of that. Now, I have to tell you that I was pretty dumb about the French thing, because I decided at the time that I was just going to get to France and I was going to learn French when I was there and take courses. But once I got to France, I didn't want to sit in an intensive course and not be in the city, experiencing the city and the country and everything it had to offer. So I'm going to tell you now that what you need to do is prepare yourself in advance by taking classes at the Alliance Francaise, get yourself up to speed, at least to a good point, so that when you do land here, you won't be as dumb and an idiot as I am. In order to learn French, I created a French-English conversation group, which we called Parler Parler. And so I sort of learned in an organic way. But I have to tell you that even after 26 years, I still don't have the foundation that I would have had if I had taken classes. So I still don't actually read or write very well, and I probably shouldn't admit to that, but I'm doing it now before all of you. The photo in the lower right corner happens to be the Alliance Francaise in Portland, which is where I met Linda Witt, and maybe a lot of you already are familiar with that building. I don't know, but it's a beautiful old building, and it was a very exciting event to actually be able to speak there many, many moons ago. So how I managed to stay in France became a little more complicated. I had a carte de séjour, which is a long stay visa, which had to be renewed every single year for 10 years, which meant I didn't have the right to work. and I had to find a way of surviving. After 10 years, though, I was able to acquire a carte de résident, which is a 10-year visa. And in order to survive, because there was no way that I could possibly leave France, wasn't happening. I ended up developing websites. This was when the web was in its infancy, and I started doing that for a variety of clients. Believe it or not, I wrote the first online restaurant guide to Paris. I still find it hard to believe that it was that long ago, and I had the gumption to do something like that. And then I started the French English Conversation Group. And in later years, I ended up being hired by International Living to open their Paris office. And that really was the beginning of the real estate adventure. So in 2004, I started the company, the Adrian Leeds Group. And of course, the rest is history. Now, you probably all know this. I probably don't need to say a word about it, the benefits of living in France. And I'm going to tell you again, once you move to France, you may never go back. So just get it in your head that, you know, it's going to be a permanent situation, because it's really tough to go in reverse. Once you have experienced life on this side of the big pond, and you see what life can be like, it's very hard to go back to living with what I think of as having blinders on. France is a beautiful, beautiful country. There is beautiful architecture and landscape, and the ultimate in style. Culturally, it's extremely rich. All of the culinary arts, the performing arts, the creative arts, and of course, the French really revel in their culture and their artistic nature. Then there's diversity. There's an amazing amount of not only ethnic diversity, but there are cityscapes and landscapes. There's urban environments, rural environments. I think that France has every sort of cityscape and landscape that the entire US has, but in a geographical area that is basically the size of Texas, and it's amazing. There's also a lifestyle that's really tough to replace anywhere else, this joie de vivre, the time to relax and reflect. By law, an employee receives 5 weeks of paid vacation every year, plus 14 paid holidays. That means that they are working to live, not living to work. And you really see that in everyday life. On top of that, because of the really big safety net that they've put in place, the security, you've got excellent and inexpensive healthcare, you've got good employment and retirement benefits. And I know I shouldn't use the word socialist or socialism, but socialist ideas in a socialist democracy really do provide a lot of care for its people. And it's something that's pretty tough to give up. They have an excellent high quality education for both children and adults. And the infrastructure is amazing because there's excellent transportation systems that are sophisticated. And there's also an amazing, inexpensive communication system. So you can get all over the country with the TGV, by train, by plane. It's, the local systems, the metro, the bus systems, it really doesn't matter where you live. The transportation systems are fantastic, which means you don't necessarily have to live with a car. And not owning and operating a car is one of the most wonderful freedoms there are. Now, there are even more benefits. And I know that everyone thinks that France is a very highly taxed society. And on income, it is higher taxed. But some taxes are considerably lower, particularly property taxes. Property taxes are literally about 1/10 of what they are in the US. And the strange thing is that the French don't really complain too much about their taxes. They realize that their taxes buy them a lot, that they get a lot for their money. So it's not what they complain about. What the French complain about is just the administration and the difficulty of getting things accomplished, which, you know, the French invented bureaucracy, and I'm going to warn you now, that is one of the things you will have to deal with. But taxes should not be a part of a problem at all. Now, there are fewer rich, there are fewer poor, and there's a larger middle class. So, and France offers that bigger safety net, which is really, I think, a big reason that we all enjoy staying here so much. You're not taxed, believe it or not, in France on your retirement income or on your investments. So for those of you who are concerned about making this move over, you really don't have to worry about that, especially if you're retired, it's not an issue at all. And believe it or not, you have the right to health care at no cost, even though you didn't pay into it, after you have arrived in France for 90 days. So you get your visa, you're here for 90 days, you register with Puma, P-U-M-A, and believe it or not, you can have benefits up to 70% of healthcare, even though you never paid into the system. So that's pretty amazing. And on top of it, the healthcare costs are about 1/10 of what they are in the US. The WHO has ranked France #1 in healthcare in the world year after year after year. And I can attest to that. Now, I know we're all dealing with COVID-19. We're all experiencing this. We are now currently in lockdown. We have a curfew at 6 p.m. And there's a tremendous amount of solidarity in France. There haven't been too many "I'm not going to wear a mask" protests going on. I think people are really respectful of it, and it seems to be working pretty well, and they're rolling out the vaccine as well. So to have the right to live and work in France, as an American citizen, you are permitted to stay 90 days within any 180-day period without a visa. And for stays between 4 and 12 months, you can be issued a long stay visa that is equivalent to a residence permit or a carte de séjour. I don't believe that the offices are open at the moment, but the link to acquire a visa to set up an appointment with the consulate is at the very bottom of the screen. So that's the official website. Now, in order to get the visa, it's actually pretty simple. All you have to do is prove that you can support yourself financially. And that is only minimum wage in France. So it's approximately 20,000 euros a year. You have to show that you have some sort of accommodations in France, which we help our clients do because we can attest to the fact that you are working with us to find those accommodations. And you have to show that you have medical coverage in order to qualify for the visa. So you can even take out a short-term insurance policy. It's just to get your visa. Once you get that visa and you enter France, then you can apply for Puma and you can be on the French healthcare system. Now, you will have to agree in writing that you will not engage in any professional activity during your stay in France. And let me just clarify that. What that means is they don't want you taking a job away from a French national. So if you are working for a US company and you're working online, remotely, and you're being paid in the US, this is not an issue. So don't confuse that with tax residency. Tax residency is when you have lived here more than 183 days or where you consider home. So even if your earnings are in the US, but you're tax resident in France, then you will be liable for tax in France, not the US. But because of the tax treaty, you do not pay income tax on the same income twice. I have a question for my team out there. I see some red marks on my screen that I think I made with my mouse. Does anyone else see them? Little red scratches?
Yeah, yeah, I see them too, Adrian, but they're not terribly distracting. I wouldn't worry about them.
I have no idea how they got there.
Yeah, and it might be that little Zoom glitch that I was telling you earlier about, but
Well, I tell you
it's
what,
not.
okay. Otherwise, what I think I'm going to do is escape and redo it, or stop share and reshare and see if it makes a difference. Okay. So I'm going to try it. I'm going to stop the share, and now I'm going to reshare and hope that they're gone. Are they gone? Yes.
Yes. Bravo. Bravo.
Thank you. I have no idea how they got there. And it's not my lipstick, okay? Okay, learning French. French is so beautiful. It's beautiful to speak. It's beautiful to hear. Fortunately, there is no language requirement to obtain the long stay visa. However, speaking French does make a big difference to integrating into a truly French lifestyle. You know, I think I arrived when I knew I could make a joke in French and people would sort of understand it and they'd actually laugh at me. That was when I knew I had, finally acquired a decent level of French. So I do recommend that you learn French in advance, you attend the Alliance Francaise, and then you can hit the ground running. You might want to consider, though, when you think about where to live in France, if your comfort level is not really good, if you're not very fluent, then you might want to be in an urban environment where other people speak English, so it's not too difficult to get by, especially in the beginning. You know, we have a joke, though, that the French do say this, that la meilleure façon d'apprendre une langue étrangère est sur l'oreiller, meaning the best way to learn a language is on the pillow. So you come here and you find a lover, and then suddenly you are speaking French fluently. Now, there's a lot of France to love. Paris, of course. Paris is a very urban lifestyle, but it has a very high cost of living. And the Riviera offers, a variety of lifestyles. You can have an urban, such as Nice. You can be suburban in any one of the enclaves. And the cost of living there is actually more moderate. And when I say cost of living, it's really primarily the cost of property, because everything else is pretty much about the same. But, your housing is what's going to be your primary expense. When you get to Provence, you've got a rural lifestyle, and again, the cost of living is moderate. When you go to the other cities outside of Paris, Nice, Provence, in the provinces, you really have a wide choice of city, urban, suburban, and rural, and you will find generally the cost of living is going to be a lot lower. When you're trying to decide where to live in France, I think there are some important aspects that a place should offer to make it really, really, really great. I think it should check these boxes. I believe that it's important to have a thriving American community, because when you have other Americans around you, you will make a lot of friends very quickly. Imagine that you suddenly meet a lot of people who are just like you. They think like you, they're Francophiles, they've had this dream for a long time. They're normally very well educated, well traveled, have had interesting lives. And it's very easy to make friends with people who are like yourself, birds of a feather. And you'll have people to commiserate with, because making the cultural crossing is not always that easy. So I highly recommend that. Secondly, I really think you should look for places that have good access to transportation. And that means having an international airport so you can travel all over Europe and all over the world, having a good TGV hub so you can travel by train quickly, easily, inexpensively, and that the local transportation is really good, because not owning and operating a car can be a freedom that you probably don't even know is possible. In the US, with the exception of New York, you pretty much live in your car and you live in that bubble. And not having that bubble anymore allows you to commune and really enjoy not only the place, but the people. and it'll save you about $10,000 a year in expense, and it will save you a lot of time, because you'll have a lot more time for the things that really matter when you're not needing to own and operate a car. There's also a complication with getting a French driving license in France. I'm not going to get into that, but there are some states that have a reciprocal agreement so that you can trade your driving license, but others that I think there are only like 13 states where you can do that. Otherwise, you really have to take the French driving test, and this is not easy or inexpensive to do. Now, the cost of living is mostly the cost of housing, and it could be for rent or for purchase, so that's entirely up to you. I would like to see you in a place that has good healthcare and hospitals, particularly, you know, if you're older, you're going to want good healthcare. Now, if you're doing business or you want really good cultural activities, that's also something to think about, where you might want to be for that. And again, your language level. If you are fluent in French, then you can be in the middle of or in a tiny hameau and have no problem whatsoever. But maybe you're going to feel more comfortable in a city like Paris or Nice, where a lot of people speak English. Then when it comes down to what kind of a property, you know, there's apartments in the cities. You could be in a village house in a village, or you could be in an independent house in the countryside, and that's all up to you. A lot of people ask me whether they should rent versus buy in the beginning. And that's a personal situation. Renting definitely allows you a lot of flexibility and expendable money in the short term. But you have to keep in mind that when you rent, you're basically paying someone else's mortgage. And it's just coming straight out of your pocket, and you're not investing in yourself. And maybe that's exactly what you want to do for the time being. But owning a home will give you security as long as you consider it a long-term investment. That is something that we always talk with our clients about, because everybody has a personal situation that's a little bit different. You know, I contend, though, that if you come and you rent for a while, you may end up making a purchase, and you're probably going to end up buying where you landed to begin with. Because even if you think you're going to rent and then move to somewhere else and try different areas of the country or different areas of a particular city, once you create a home, it'll be your home. You're going to feel like you just want to be there, and you're going to want to recreate that same situation over and over again. So if you're renting, there are two types of rental contracts. There's a lease that is a 1-year lease, and that carries a 30-day cancellation with it, and it's only on furnished properties. An unfurnished property carries a 3-year lease with a 90-day cancellation notice. That means that you can basically give your landlord notice on it with a furnished property 30 days, or with an unfurnished 90 days in advance without any issue. You are not stuck to that 1 or 3-year lease. The one exception is Paris has a 30-day cancellation notice on an unfurnished property. And that's because of the housing shortage in Paris that they created that one difference. The problem with renting is that it's really tough to not only find the property, but to secure it, because the landlords don't want to take the risk of squatters. The laws in France protect the tenant, not the landlord. And in order for the landlord to protect himself, he has to take some sort of a security deposit, which could be a year's rent in escrow account with a bank, or a renter's insurance. And one of the companies that does that is called Guarant Me. I've written it here in the slide, guarantme.fr. I find this really fascinating, that the renter, the tenant, must take out an insurance policy to protect the landlord from the tenant not paying the rent. But that's how it works. And the landlords do tend to favor salaried individuals who have an indefinite work contract. But we work very hard for our clients to prove to the landlords that our American tenants are the best tenants they will ever have, which is definitely true. Americans make the best tenants. There's no question about it. And once a landlord finds that out, then they're hooked for life. And I will tell you this, though, it's better to find a good landlord than a good apartment, because a good landlord usually runs a good apartment. So we do provide this service to find a rental property. We can do it sight unseen, so you can move directly in, or you can come and visit, and the choices that we make on your behalf, that is when you can come, when we're freed up and out of confinement. Now, finding a property to purchase is a similar situation. Anyone can purchase property in France. There is no restriction. You don't need to have any kind of a visa. Having a visa doesn't make it any better or any different. There is no MLS. That means every agent has access only to their own listings, and they don't intend to split commissions. Now, the commissions are usually about 5%, and they are included in the asking price. So whenever you see properties listed, on a website or in an agency window, that price includes the agency commission. But the agents, see themselves as proprietary, and they don't want to share information. They don't want to share clients. They don't want to share listings. And that makes it really difficult for the buyer. It means you really have to go to every individual agent or agency to see what their offerings are, even if it's a Century 21 or an ERA or an ORPI. Each agency is franchised and owned by someone different. And so even those agents have to share among themselves, and they're not always willing to do that. Now, I will say that in Paris, they won't do it at all. Can't even talk about it. Whereas in Nice, we can often find agents that are willing to share their commissions, and they're usually more open to it in all the other provinces and regions. And I do warn you, though, because the agents represent the seller, not the buyer, that they will say or do almost anything to make a sale. And it's not that we don't have agents that we trust. We work with a lot of agents we trust, but you have to remember that they're working for the seller, not the buyer. We work for the buyer. When you hire us, we're working on your behalf and no one else. And that's a kind of insurance. So one of the things that we also do is work with you to get financing. And we work with mortgage brokers who specialize in the North American buyer. Financing has become very difficult to acquire thanks to FATCA. I don't have a slide here about FATCA, but you might all want to write this down, FATCA. It stands for the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, and it places regulations on foreign financial institutions to report their US customers. As a result of that, the banks just don't really want to work with American clients. And so there are fewer and fewer banks that are willing to lend to Americans. There's also a restriction on age, and that is because they want the mortgage to end by the time you're 75 years old. That is because there is a mandatory life insurance policy attached to the mortgage that frees it up for inheritance purposes at the time of death. And the premiums become pretty prohibitive over the age of 60. So they really don't want to lend to you if you're over 60 years old. However, there are other situations with some banks, particularly private banks. And so I'm not going to say it's impossible. It's just a little more difficult. The mortgage payment must not exceed more than 1/3 of your disposable income. And the banks prefer salaried individuals who have a regular income that is guaranteed to being self-employed. And that comes from their French default mode, because in France, being self-employed is a bigger risk than it is in the United States. And when you're salaried in France, you are guaranteed that job for the rest of your life. And even if you get fired, you're going to have unemployment for several years. So they really look towards salaried individuals first. Amazingly, though, interest rates are under 2%. So I call it free money because it's a lot less than you're getting in the market right now. So if you can take a mortgage, you definitely want to do it. It is a very financially sound thing to do in today's world. Now, if you're thinking of buying a property and renting it for revenue purposes, meaning that you might want to use it a few weeks a year and the rest of the year you just want to rent it out and recover some of the your costs. This has become much more difficult in Paris. There are laws now for short-term rental that apply to cities of 200,000 population or more, but every city enforces the laws differently. So in general, primary residences can be rented up to 120 days a year short-term, but that's if it's a primary residence. If it's your secondary residence, then in Paris, there are only two possibilities. You either rent it long-term, which is a 1-year lease, furnished, or a mobility lease, which is 1 to 10 months, but it must be to someone who's there on business or education. In Nice, however, it's different. You can rent short-term up to 6 years. And so that gives you at least a window of opportunity. We have a lot of clients who are buying in Nice now because they can at least, start off with something that maybe they're using from time to time, and they will eventually move into it after a few years. So it works very well for them. I have a couple of clients, however, that we're working with to actually make an investment in Nice, which is half the price of Paris, and generate a revenue in Nice that will cover the cost of renting an apartment in Paris, which means that they could literally have both Paris and Nice at the same time. For me, that is a seriously ideal situation. I have an apartment in Nice, my apartment in Paris. I split my time between the two cities. I love them both. And it gives me, the yin to the yang, and it's just perfect. Now, I will tell you, though, that if you are renting illegally and you get caught, that your fine could be 50,000 euros. So I don't recommend doing it illegally if you can help it. Now, the purchase process takes a long time. It takes 4 to 6 months from the initial visits to the signing of the deed. And even that's under normal circumstances. With COVID-19, things have been delayed, and we have some files that have literally gone a year long. That is highly unusual, however. Now, when you go through this process, the seller tends to allow only about 5% negotiation room. So you can't make a lowball offer and expect the seller to accept that. In fact, you could even insult them by doing that. So you kind of have to be careful. But the seller is morally obligated to accept asking price. So if you offer the asking price on a property, it's pretty much yours. Once that happens, the notaire or the lawyer is notified and begins to process and organize all the documentation. And there's a lot of documentation that takes about a month just to gather all the necessary information in order to get to the point where you have a pre-sale agreement, which is called a promesse or a compromis de vente. And that is only signed after all the due diligence is done. The due diligence has to do with reading the diagnostics, looking at 3 years of the meeting notes from the homeowner associations, and also the bylaws of the building. So we go through all of that with you, make sure that you understand everything and there's nothing of any question that would prevent you from buying this property. Make sure it is a good property. At that point, when the promesse or the compromis de vente is signed, a 10% deposit is put down and held in escrow by the notaire. There is then a 10-day cooling off period within which a full retraction is possible. So a lot of consumer protection is built in. You can actually get to that point and then decide, you know what, this property is not for me. Sometimes it happens that you'll have our designer, Martin Di Matteo, or someone come in to estimate the renovation costs. And maybe you decide that you don't want to spend that much money, and so you still have the ability to retract the purchase. Now, once all of that is done, you've gone through the 10-day cooling off period, you need to allow at least 2 to 3 months between the signature of the pre-sale agreement and the final deed to allow for the financing process, which also has consumer protection built in. So it just all takes time. It's highly administrative. It's one hurdle after another. We go through it with you from beginning to end. But it's something you just have to relax with and let happen. So the reason we make a difference is because, first of all, we're representing your interests. I will not let a client make a bad decision, or at least I will try not to let a client make a bad decision, because we're going to point out absolutely everything they could possibly need to know about the property, and then it's up to them, of course. But we search for the property on behalf of the either renter or buyer, both. We provide all the resources and all the professionals that are necessary. We do the due diligence. We advise along the way. We assist in translating all the documentation, so you don't have to spend money on translations. And we manage the process from beginning to end. I think of it as a kind of insurance, like an insurance policy, to make sure that you don't fall into the pits that happen along the way, which they do. And I really don't think anyone should do this process alone if they can help it, whether it's with us or someone else, because there are too many pitfalls along the way and mistakes are very easy to be made. Besides that, I think we offer a lot to the community. I write 3 publications a week, our Nouvelles Lettres, and you can subscribe to those. You can unsubscribe at any time if they become too much for you. You can watch us on House Hunters TV. We have done, wow, I think 45 shows since 2006. They periodically rerun them, and then we announce whenever new episodes are coming up. Every month we do a coffee gathering that we call après-midi, and until COVID happened, they were always live in Paris at a cafe with a speaker. And now, of course, we've been doing them on Zoom, and anybody can participate on Zoom. So if you tune into our website, under one section of events, you can find out exactly who's speaking when and register. It's very, very easy, and they're fun. There's always interesting speakers and great topics. In the fall, we have a Living and Investing in France conference that's going to take place in Nice, and then we're doing a tour to Provence. You can do one or the other or both. We had it scheduled last fall. We have now booked it this fall. We're keeping our fingers crossed that it is going to happen. You will hear from me one way or another, well, whether it will or not, but it's going to be a lot of fun, so stay tuned for that. You can always book a personal consultation with me. That's the best way to start, is spend 2 hours with me, and we're going to strategize the direction that the best direction you can take, depending on your goals and your finances and what you want to accomplish. We've also been doing some group consultations with 5 people on them, all based on one topic. So stay tuned for some more of those coming up in March. And then, of course, you can always participate in webinars such as this. I've got another webinar that's a financial forum happening next week. We're promoting it on our website, so you can look for that. And we have another one coming up at the end of February that will be kind of a prelude to the upcoming conference. So be sure to tune in. And all of that is promoted on our weekly Nouvelles Lettres. So if you subscribe to the newsletters, you will for sure be informed. So again, I really do think it's easier than you might think. We have helped, hundreds of people, perhaps in the thousands at this point. I've never really counted, make the move to France. It's really my raison d'etre is to help people make the move smoothly, and we consult to strategize how to do it so that it can be successful. I believe that you should definitely, pay professionals to put you on the right path. You can crowdsource, you can be on websites, you can look at forums. You're going to get a lot of conflicting information. I do think you should talk to the professionals, but don't let fear of this move get in the way of your dreams. You just put one foot in front of the other, and eventually you do get there. And as long as you've got good guidance, you'll be fine. And on a personal level, I'd like to say that I think you should try to replace the word expectation with the word hope. And that way you will never be disappointed. You can always just hope, and whatever is, and you'll never feel bad about it. I do definitely think you should prepare in advance by learning French with the Alliance Francaise. And I'd like to just make a note that the gentleman that you see pictured here is John Garland Jones. He came to me after he divorced. He was unhappy. I recommended he move to Nice. He wanted a singing career. He is now happily ensconced in Nice and singing his heart out live and on Zoom. And he and I have done 2 House Hunters International episodes together. One that was done live in Nice and the other that we actually filmed from confinement this past spring. And on that note, we're going to open this up now for questions. So ask me anything. And I think I will unshare my screen. And you guys can do guest speaker or gallery. It really doesn't matter. I see a lot of questions coming in. Patty, maybe you can.
We have lots and lots of questions.
Okay.
And
if you guys are.
Where do I want to start? From Jim Thompson. He wanted to know, how do you move money to France?
Oh, well, that's the easiest thing in the world.
And I'm going to add a link.
Okay, please do add a link. Moving money to France. So basically, I recommend that you work with a currency broker. A currency broker will transfer from dollars to euros. You send it to the broker sends it then to your French bank, or they will hold it on your behalf. They offer a much lower rate than your average bank. The banks tend to charge about 3% in the spread. The spread is the buy and the sell rate. Whereas the currency brokers tend to offer 1% between the buy and the sell rate in the spread. We recommend MoneyCorp and OFX. Those are the 2 that we recommend. Patty put a link, I think, in the chat, but it's on our website. So you can find it under, we have a new website, so I don't remember what the title is. I think it's Living and Investing, and then there's a link for currency exchange. Okay?
Yeah, it's under the About Us tab. There's a partners link.
Okay. Oh, no, it's also in the under further down, Patty.
Okay, but either way, but the link is in the chat.
Okay, great. Thank you.
The link is in the chat. Somebody just asked a quick question. What about TransferWise? Do you want to give your 2 cents?
Oh, TransferWise. Okay, I'm going to give away a secret. TransferWise is very convenient for very small amounts of money transfer, not for big amounts. And don't tell MoneyCorp this is what I do, or OFX, but I go to TransferWise and I see what the rate they'll give me is, and then I go to MoneyCorp, and if MoneyCorp is higher, I'll give them a call and say, guess what? This is what I can get at TransferWise, and they will match or do better. But the difference is that TransferWise doesn't offer the service. MoneyCorp and OFX offer a lot of services, human beings you can talk to, you can plan ahead. It's really better to work with one of them, for sure. Okay. Next.
Okay. A question from Heather L. Can you find housing in France for less than 200,000 euros that's not a studio?
Yes. Not in Paris, but definitely in France. You can find a 1-bedroom apartment in Nice that is under 200,000. Yes, and in other parts of France, easily, yes. But remember, 200,000, then you have closing costs of up to about 10% in closing costs. So if it's 200,000, you need 220,000. And then you're going to need renovation and decorations. So I think you need a little padding around that. But the answer to that is yes.
Okay. I have so many.
Well, I see one that says, can your company help us buy a character home or chateau in the southwest of France or Brittany? Of course. We can help you find property just about anywhere. Yeah, it's really not a problem. What we would do is we would recruit people who are on the ground to assist us, but because it's a little more difficult when we're not physically there. We are physically set up in Paris and in Nice on the Côte d'Azur. That's no problem. And we have agents in the Southwest and in Provence, but we can work in a partnership situation with someone else in other parts of the country to make this happen. As a matter of fact, we have clients right now buying a very large, very important chateau to the tune of many millions of euros, sight unseen. And our job is to assist them in doing that. It's a purchase assistance. They had identified the property, but we traveled there to visit it, take videos, do all the due diligence, and we are helping them with this process from beginning to end. Sight unseen. In fact, we have a lot of clients who are buying sight unseen at the moment. Almost all of them are because of COVID-19, but they want to have something that they can move into immediately and they didn't want to wait. And while the rate of exchange has been going up, it makes sense to do something now. And while the interest rates are low, so it's entirely doable. Mm-hmm. And you can trust us to find you a great property.
Okay, and another question from Heather, who asked about housing for under 200K. Are you able to buy for the future and rent until you retire?
Ask that question again. Not sure I understand.
Are you able to buy for the future? So can you buy something now, and rent it out until you retire?
Of course. You can rent it for the rest of your life if that's what you want to do. Of course you can. You can do whatever you want with your property. You can leave it empty if that's what you want to do. It's your property. Mm-hmm. Now, the rental, you have to follow the rental laws though. So just keep that in mind, whatever the rental laws are. Mm-hmm.
Okay, a question from Sarah Mandelbaum. Do you know of a financial advisor specializing in transatlantic moves to advise whether our finances make this move feasible?
Oh, I have the best financial advisor in the world. His name is Brian Dunhill. He's with Dunhill Financial. It's dunhillfinancial.com. Patty will put the link in the chat. We are doing a forum next week. I highly recommend that you visit our site and sign up for that. Brian is really the best financial advisor I've ever come across. We have a lot of clients in common. They are all very happy with him. And he is definitely someone who can help you organize your entire financial situation. He's a young guy who is half British, half American, grew up in Brussels, went to school in the US, college in the US, and his father is a financial advisor. He grew up with it, and he's really smart and really personable. And I can't say enough good things about him. Great question.
Good question. No, I forgot which next one I was going to mention, but I do just want to make a comment to everyone. Those that are sending me private messages, with nearly 400 participants, it's very difficult for me to answer your private messages. So please feel free just to send an email to info@adrianleeds.com, and we'll answer after the session.
Yes, actually, I'd like to say that I know it's very hard. We've only got a few minutes left, and it's really hard to answer all these questions in a few minutes. So definitely, feel free to email us. You can email us to info@adrianleeds.com. Patty will get it, and we will deal with your question and answer you. We'll be happy to do that.
Hey, Patty, there is a question. A couple of people have asked about the impact of COVID and the pandemic on the real estate market. Can you shed some light on that?
Booming. We're booming. Prices have not gone down. Prices are up. The French are discovering properties outside of urban areas because they want more space and they can work remotely. So that's happening all over the world, I think, not just here, but also in the US. I think people thought the price of property would go down, but it's not. People are in their homes. They're living inside now. And we have not seen prices go down whatsoever. And there's very little on the market. So it's moving very quickly. And as I said, we have clients that are buying sight unseen. Now, our North American clientele is a little bit different than if they were French clients, because we've also had the last 4 years of, the Trump administration, which has, and COVID, which has encouraged an awful lot of Americans to make some sort of a move. And we're experiencing that for sure. I have to say that I'd like to say, that I'm very proud to be an American. I'm very thrilled with what's happening right now in the United States. I'm feeling very, very good about that. But at the same time, I really don't regret for a single minute moving to France. You are always an American. You will always feel attached as an American. We have a very strong community here and we commiserate together. In fact, I almost feel more of an American living here than I was living in the US. In a strange way, it's even more important that we support what's happening there. But I am enjoying a French lifestyle, and all of us here are, and we are enjoying the benefits of a French way of life. And we see, once you get here and you see what's good and what's bad, and there are pluses and minuses on both sides, there is no question about it. But we live here in a socialist democracy. There is more of a bigger safety net. The playing field is more égal or equal or balanced, and we appreciate that. I can't say enough wonderful things about the consumer protectionism that is built in, the fact that I've got great health care for very little money. My property taxes are almost nothing compared to what they would be in the US. The ability to own property, the cost of entry is high, but the cost of ownership is low. So I don't think that anyone who's thinking about making a move to France is going to ever regret that, quite honestly. And I don't know anyone living here who does. So maybe on that note, I take one last question. Linda or Patty, you see something that really needs to be answered?
Here's one that just came in from Jay. Is it true that French property values tend to not appreciate?
Oh, au contraire. It depends on what you buy, where you buy it. Paris, okay, my apartment that you see behind me, I bought in the year 2000. It is worth well over 5 times what I paid for it 20 years ago. That enabled me, believe it or not, I'm going to tell this one last story before this ends. I bought this apartment, it increased in value. Because it increased in value, I took out a subsequent mortgage to buy more property. Over the years, those properties increased in value. I continued to take additional equity release loans. Over the course of, I think it was a total of about 10 years, not quite, 9 years, I ended up with 5 properties. 3 were rentals. The 3 rentals covered 5 mortgages. And I started with $40,000 and I ended up with $3.25 million in property. Now that happens because the property appreciated. Now, maybe in the middle of the countryside, you're not going to see the same kind of appreciation. But in Paris and in Nice and in certain urban areas, absolutely yes. So I suppose on that note, I'm supposed to say goodbye and thank you all very, very, very much. It's adrianleeds.com, ADRIANLEEDS.com. All the information's there. Sign up for the newsletters. Please register for an Alliance Francaise course. Learn French. I suppose what I need to say is au revoir, merci, à bientôt, à la prochaine fois.
Yes. Thank you very much, Adrian. It's been eye-opening. You're always wonderful. Thanks to our great audience, and look forward to our email message that we'll send you within the next day or so that includes links to Adrian's sites as well as a couple of others. Thanks, everybody, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Au revoir.
Bye, everyone. Au revoir, tout le monde.